Just when you thought driving an electric vehicle was going to be cheap and easy, you invested all your hard-earned dollars for that high-priced electric vehicle, you installed that level 2 charger in your home, and you thought, hey, while I'm out driving around, there's a great network of charging stations across this nation, and most of it's free, and I can drive around free as a bird. But guess what? Things have changed. Costs are starting to increase for the drivers, and the cost of driving an electric vehicle just went up. So it's no real secret. There's 3 major levels of charging stations. Level 1 is basically your 120 volt outlet. You plug that vehicle in, your electric vehicle, whether you're driving a Tesla, for example, Model 3, Model Y, there's a lot of other vehicle brands out there today. That Model 1 charger basically gets you about 5 kilometers per hour of charging range, essentially, or it's going to take you at least 24 to 48 hours of charging to actually get that vehicle charged back up to about 80% of where it should be. Of course, you have your level 2, which is harder to come by. You find those are generally 208 volt or 220 volt, 240 volt charging stations. You can often outfit your house, but it's usually a pretty high significant charging range, 32 to 60 amps, and it does take a significant amount of power. You find those at quite a few locations across the globe, and that's a pretty typical charging station. In most cases, those were typically free till now. And then of course there's a level 3 charging station, which gets you a significant amount of charge. It's often charging up to about 480 volts DC, hits it hard. Rarely can you find those in residential applications. They're generally built more commercially. You're finding them roadside, you're finding them at outlets, and basically those are the traditional level 3 chargers we talk about when you say somebody plugs in and is able to charge their car within about a half an hour time frame. It generally gets you almost 200 kilometers per hour range, and in some cases it might take you an hour, hour and a half, but generally most electric vehicles today can get up to about 80% charge in about 40 to 45 minutes. So that's usually the most versatile. Now with that said, the level 3 and hitting it with that hard of a charge is often shorten up the lifespan of a battery. And of course, if you do that all the time, they say that the battery life won't be there when you expect it. So generally speaking, you've got the 3 major charging options, and level 2 is the one that's most flexible. Most people own those in their homes. After a while, they can install them in their house, and you'll find some of those commercially. Again, as I say, level 2 often was cheap or free till now, but things have changed. For example, there's lots of little communities and hamlets. We're often offering up free charging options for a lot of buyers to get people into driving an electric vehicle, to get excited about it. So level 1 is usually free anyway, but you gotta have to pretty much wait there, and nobody can really charge their car up enough to make it useful. If you're charging your vehicle at home or at work, you might get 10% of charge within an 8-hour, 9-hour time frame. So it's really not that versatile. So it needs to be locked in for a significant amount of time. So where people really need the charge that's going to help them with their range is that level 2 charger. But again, you're in that 4 to 10 hour time frame to get it up to 80%. So even that's not all that versatile unless you're charging it overnight at your home or at your workplace, where you might be able to get a 220 volt charging station available. It's really not that practical. But till this point, a lot of these charging stations were free, or you could get them all included. You get a charging level 3 charger available to you with the free membership, or if you bought the car, obviously, for example, like a Tesla, in earlier generations, they were giving free lifetime charging, and a lot of that lifetime charging has gone away, and it basically leaves the customer paying whatever the local charging stations or the vendors are going to charge you. Now, unfortunately, in unregulated electrical markets, and we see that all over the place, North America, Canada, United States, it varies depending on the jurisdiction. What you're finding are vehicles that may be subject to different charging rates and the charges that they are applying, or the billing that they're able to apply. Now, while a lot of places and facilities aren't charging a ton of money, certainly zero for level 1, and level 2 is usually free as well, that's going up. For example, there's this small little hamlet here in Alberta called Okotoks. Now, southern Alberta, it's a local area that till now, they've been giving a lot of free charging available to the customer, particularly level 2. They generally don't have any level 3 chargers yet in their jurisdiction, but level 2 was free. till now. Now this little hamlet in Okotoks is actually said to be starting to charge $2 per hour. Now remember, we backed this conversation up to where we said it could take anywhere from 4 to 10 hours. Worst case scenario, you have a battery that's way on the bottom end and you need to charge your vehicle, and maybe you're okay with sitting around for 8 or 10 hours charging your vehicle. That's going to cost you anywhere $20 or more, potentially charge your electric vehicle if it was run down to the bottom. You're going to be stuck paying over $20, and you're going to have to wait for a significant amount of time. Most vehicles are going to be 8 to 10 hours. So you're really going to be inconvenienced, and on top of it, insult to injury, now it's no longer free. You might be stuck with a small bill of $20 to $25. Now on top of that, unfortunately, this Okotoks town is not yet installing level 3 chargers, but we know those are available across the nation. And a lot of those are coming at a significant cost for the convenience. They're basically charging most customers about $22, $23 per hour of use. Now, of course, as I said before, half an hour gets you a quick charge, might get you topped up, might get you the majority of your charge. In most cases, you need probably 40, 45 minutes. Round it up to an hour, you might need to pay that $20 to $25. Also on a class 3 charger, if you're able to find one. Clearly, that's what Tesla's offering up. And in most cases, Tesla's providing those big superchargers that we all hear not so much about. And those are going to charge $20 to $25 per hour if you're driving one of your fancy electric vehicles and you need to top it up because you've run it almost down to nothing. Now remember, I also said that we're talking about unregulated markets. Now we know in certain places, for example here in Alberta, where the markets are very unregulated or deregulated, if you will. So what that generally means is the market demands drive the price, and it's almost operated like a monopoly. And the local power suppliers generally start charging customers whatever they want. They charge more because they validate or they verify, and they basically try to justify that they have to continue to upgrade their infrastructure. For example, because now they've wiped off all the coal generating plants and they've swapped them out more or less with natural gas. Now, it's not that natural gas is so much more expensive to operate, but they're also dependent on the cost of natural gas, not to mention the actual infrastructure construction that costs to actually make that conversion. Now means every single customer in Alberta is on the hook for these increased costs. Now it all gets blended in at the end result when you're plugging your car in. So you want more electricity, you want more electrical loads, be prepared to pay the piper, because that's what's going on in some deregulated or unregulated marketplaces. And so this is starting to happen, and we are again truly at the mercy of some of these power companies which operate more like a monopoly. And that's where the customers are going to be starting to jack up, getting paid more and more and more for their electric vehicles to stay on the road. A few short weeks ago, we had what they called the polar vortex. Essentially, from the northern Arctic, there was this cold weather that rolled down into a lot of the prairies in Canada. And basically, Canada, we're talking Alberta, Saskatchewan, and some of the prairie provinces actually were subjected to some extreme temperatures. Now, some say, well, that's not typical. Well, actually, it actually is. And it's not uncommon in Alberta and Saskatchewan, Manitoba, to witness temperatures that might get as low as minus 40 degrees Celsius or close to 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Well, that's a bad situation. And some might say, well, we don't have that in Houston or we don't have that in California. Well, states like California, for example, are charging it other ways, and we know that they're not doing customers any benefits either. And on top of that, remember, have you heard that in certain states now they're starting to apply another tax? Because you know, when you have your traditional ICE, internal combustion vehicle, that operates on gas or diesel, there's always a little bit of road tax that's thrown into that charging, into that fuel. So every time you fuel up at the pump, there's a little bit of tax that's plugged into there to repair the roads, the potholes, to upgrade, maintenance. But when you drive an electric vehicle, you think you're getting out squeaky clean, but now what's starting to happen is a lot of these states are starting to catch on, and they're starting to utilize the network and the brains of these cars and the GPS systems that are mounted on board to feed back to those who actually can bill you, and you will get billed to the tune of whatever they feel like billing you, because you're still using the road. You thought driving an electric vehicle got you off scot-free and you didn't have to pay any road tax because you weren't putting in fuel or gasoline? Guess again, a lot of these states are getting on the wiser, and they're starting to bill these customers in certain states for the use of these roads anyhow. So they're not getting off scot-free there either. There are certainly more pitfalls related to expenses on owning electric vehicles. We won't even talk about the replacement of the batteries in 10 years when it costs you $30 or $40 or $50,000. Most people actually dump their cars, within 3 or 4 years anyhow and trade up, and it's really not a big conversation until you buy these vehicles used, which coincidentally does impact their used values, and people just aren't buying them because they're catching on to the cost that they will be exposed to once these vehicles hit that 8 to 12 year range. Another thing I have to act back to that polar vortex conversation. Things get really cold here now in a lot of the prairie provinces and certainly in the northern US, United States. Now, the batteries that are mounted in these electric vehicles have a blanket around them and they're electric. And to keep the batteries stable, they actually have to preheat and they have to keep heat around those batteries so they don't freeze solid and fail catastrophically. So in doing so, the batteries themselves charge and heat or power the heater to keep the heat around the batteries themselves. And in doing so, it drives the consumption of your battery power way down, way more aggressively. And that was happening a lot in this last stretch here during the polar vortex. People found themselves with batteries that were dying very quickly. And when they were gone, they had to plug in their vehicles and the charging took literally 2 or 3 times longer than it generally does, because what ends up happening is while you're charging your batteries, the chargers themselves don't operate all that well. And on top of it, you're fighting off the charging that's going on in the heaters within the batteries themselves. And so it's just trying to stave off that extreme cold. And in doing so, it just takes 2 to 3 times longer to charge those batteries. And you no longer are subjected to that $22 supercharge. You might be subjected more to a $40 or $50 supercharge because you're trying to keep the vehicle charging longer and it's not keeping up with the extreme cold temperature. Now, while yes, that's an anomaly, and yes, we only see that for maybe a week at a time, maybe 2 or 3 times in a winter, the fact remains that is a reality. And so you might be subjected to some elevated, escalated prices associated with battery charging for your electric vehicle. Well, everybody believes that driving an electric vehicle is very cheap to get by while you're driving on a day-to-day basis. It might be great in southern US, southern Florida, for example, Texas, maybe California. The fact remains is it's not free. And once more people get on board with driving these electric vehicles, there's going to be more and more people subjected to increased costs because these vendors are catching on. And that's the plan right from the get-go, is get more people on board and then hit them where it hurts. Once everybody's weaned onto electric vehicles, you will be paying the pipers. And so on top of that, as a result, we know used Tesla prices are going down. Used vendors are catching on to the fact that, wait a minute, these are higher risk and they don't even want to sell these either. And with all of that said, used car market is starting to take a little bit of a hit, and specifically used electric vehicles are even taking a bigger hit, and a lot of vendors are finding them to be a higher risk of vehicle to sell. With all of that said, companies like Vroom, the online used car manufacturer vendor, sales vendor, has literally gone out of business because they're not making the sales and people are catching on. So definitely be sure to check out that video all about the used car market and what's happening and why Vroom went out of business. So hope to see each and every one of you on the next one. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.